Yeah, so the presentation will be recorded, but not discussion, I believe. Yes.
Yes, exactly. So we will record the presentation. So welcome everyone, welcome again. And Gosha, the floor is yours. The Zoom floor is yours. And thank you for being here and sharing your ideas and your findings with us today.
Hmm. Well, I would like to warmly welcome all participants. This presentation, as Gotcha said, is based on my PhD studies. The aspects I present today are only a small part of the larger thesis, so obvious simplifications are necessary. After this presentation, as Gotcha said, there will be opportunity to comment and to ask questions. Let me begin with some reflections on the origins of my study. My interest in Polish elite education developed gradually. It stemmed from casual conversations with my Polish friends who were discussing school choices for their senior high school children. The degree of scrutiny some applied to the selection of school for their children was remarkable. They tested the opinions of others in their circles. They talked about the school's demographics and cultural profile. They checked school rankings, the conditions of entry, and university admission rates. School fees were also coming into focus, particularly when they were on the higher end of the spectrum. I observed that the choices made often required children to travel long distances or be driven by parents. But what I found particularly puzzling was the differences in my friends' perception of prestige. For some, the most important outcome was for the child to be accepted to a top selective government school. Others were advocating for private, economically exclusive institutions. There were animated discussions why some of the most prestigious schools were better than others. Such exchanges clearly showed that different characteristics scored higher or lower in the minds of the debaters. The only common trace was the desire to send their children to a school with superior reputation. I found it fascinating. The, Im- the image of the education system from my childhood, egalitarian, universal, uniform, and secular, was suddenly challenged. Listening to those conversations, I started to wonder whether the changes to politics and economy would result in emergence of elite education in Poland, and whether these new forms would be similar or different to the elite education in the West. In Central and Eastern European countries, and particularly in Poland, studies of elite schools are just beginning to emerge. This coincides with the citizens' growing wealth and availability of educational offers that are targeting elites. A growing demand for places in prestige educational institutions is likely due to increasing competition for best paid jobs and for places at the best universities, which forces parents to invest more in education of their children. Such developments contribute to growing segregation in the previously egalitarian system of education. And actually, it's systems, not system, because it's happening not only in Poland, but also in Northern Europe, in countries where education was quite egalitarian, like Sweden, Finland, Denmark, and Norway. So, when first reviewing the relevant scholarly literature, I soon discovered that the academic research on elite schools in post-communist countries such as Poland was extremely limited. The differences between the high-status schools and ordinary schools in Poland have been until recently obscured. The concept of an elite school did not exist in Polish post-communist educational research, nor was it particularly of interest to the general public. This has begun to change. popular media, both printed and electronic, began to publish articles about schools for elites, with sensational headlines announcing that well-known public figures and celebrities sent their children to private elite schools. The idea that elite private schools are the forge of privilege and future success, long acknowledged by the literature on elite schools in Anglophone countries, started to appear more frequently in the Polish media discourse. Interviews with principals and reports from journalists who visited those exclusive places followed in the response to growing public interest. I was keen to identify the factors that contributed to increasing differentiation of the education arena in Poland. Establishing what constitutes an elite school was quite a challenge. My thinking was pushed in different directions, depending on what I read and who I spoke to. I began to wonder, should I, like some of the research I studied, focus on one type of elite schooling, looking for similarities with its counterparts in the West and Asia? I felt that choosing such an approach, I would forego an opportunity to expose the bigger picture. It became clear to me that the most prestigious high school institutions in Poland are not homogeneous, and that the differences between various types are too big to ignore. On the contrary, even in the early stages of my research, it was easy to notice that the elite schools differ according to the characteristics and outlooks of the elites that create, select, and support them. Having done my preliminary research on elite schooling, the diversity of elite schools in Poland extended far beyond the boundaries of what constituted the usual image of elite school in, say, Britain, United States, or Switzerland. Well-established elite institutions in the West are often located in magnificent big buildings and boast excellent physical facilities, manicured gardens, large ovals, swimming pools, restaurants, and learning spaces. Most of them also offer boarding. And here I think I will start sharing my slides with you because I have some pictures to show. So if I can maybe share slides with you at the moment. Sorry, I should start from the beginning. Okay, that's my first slide. And here I have a picture of the probably most well-known elite school in the West. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Yes, you can? Okay.
Yeah.
It's, of course, Eton College. And Eton College is an exclusive boarding school, sometimes called the Nursery of England's Gentlemen. Founded in 1440, Eton has a long list of famous alumni, including members of British and world royalty and many celebrities. I won't be talking much about those Western schools, but I just show you some pictures. It's Eton College. Then we have, of course, Institut Le Rosey, which is in Switzerland. And also it's considered to be the most expensive elite private school in the world. It's located in Switzerland. Switzerland is known for having many elite private schools. Then there is a well-known school in United States, Phillips Exeter Academy, regularly called America's best boarding school, has educated many famous people, celebrities, and heads of states. So, most common signifiers of elite schooling, well, first identified, maybe not first, but actually epitomized in one of the researchers called Gaston Fernandez, 5 E's. And these 5 E's are simply exclusion. Students are carefully selected. Careful selection provides rationale for exclusion of others. And there are various ways that exclusion is instituted. Engagement. Students engage in a plethora of learning opportunities, developing the whole person and allowing different talents to flourish. Excellence. Students develop their talents to the highest level, demonstrating their excellence and demonstrating that they are the best of the best. Entitlement. While excelling, students confirm their entitlement to the privilege of elite education. They are privileged to attend a particular elite school. And finally, envisioning. Students envision themselves in other equally elite spaces, pursuing challenging careers and assuming leadership roles. To label an institution as elite is to indicate that they are deemed to have high status among social groups that have the power to make such judgments. So, how do Polish elite schools compare? Traditional criteria, such as long history, financial exclusivity, academic excellence, select entry, or cultural and economic prestige, were not always coalescing in Poland as signifiers of eliteness. There were other inconspicuous aspects outside the traditional matrix that needed to be captured and analyzed. Paradoxically, the main criterion for establishing what constitutes an elite school is its reputation among those whose opinions matter most, the elites, political, professional, economic, and cultural. While some signifiers, such as high academic achievement or high social and cultural capital of school population, may prevail in all elite schools, in Poland, there are other individual factors that feature prominently in different schools. As elite schools could not exist without elites, my study also scrutinizes a very broad group of elite schools' clientele. Following my scrutiny of Poland's elite school market, I recognized a mutual interdependence between identified types of elites and the schools they select for their children. I consider Polish elites not as a cohesive group defined by their privilege and status or professional and occupational category. Rather, I focus on the elite's socio-political and socio-cultural outlooks that are reflected through these school choices. Therefore, apart from the elite's economic or political advantage, it is their socio-political and cultural outlooks, their Weltanschauung, and their mutual conditioning by the identified socio-historical forces in the context of contemporary Poland that become the subject of my analysis. These outlooks can be grouped in meta-categories, which I will describe in a moment. The elite education opportunities previously provided by the prestigious government selective schools have been extended to the new players on the market, private, social, and international schools that cater for various groups of elite clientele. Diverse forms of elite education exemplify broader societal trends. In Poland, it is the incongruous relationship between the remnants of socialist heritage, strong patriotic tradition, influence of Catholic Church, and globalization trends that impact the elite secondary schooling, both public and non-public. In the process of establishing what constitutes an elite school in Poland, I had to move to and fro between theory and and the specifics of the Polish context. I quickly discovered that the existing theories of elites and elite schools were not sufficient to explain and to illuminate the diversity and the idiosyncrasies of elite schools in Poland. So let me have a look at I'll show you some pictures without identifying the schools, because for privacy reasons, I cannot do that. Some of the schools I can identify, but not all of them. Here is an example of an elite school in Poland. Another elite school in Poland, quite well known. Okay, this one looks a bit nicer. Yes, this one has longer tradition. Here is one of the private schools in the middle of Warsaw. Nice, restored, old building, but no big grounds, no green ovals, nothing special. Here is one of the newer schools, one that provides international baccalaureate diploma, well known in specific circles. And this school is one of the newest, a very new player on the market, in existence for about 10 years. Has already become well known as the most elite and most expensive school in Warsaw. So, as you can see, they differ quite significantly from the well-established elite schools in the West. To facilitate a better understanding of such diversity, I developed a theory cum conceptual framework that augments the discussion of elites and broadens the scope of the study while maintaining the focus on a specifically Polish education context. It became clear to me that the dominant forces with implications for elite formation and elite school education generally fit into 4 broad categories. Globalization, European integration, socialist heritage, and tradition. This became my interpretive framework, which I called 4 angles of scrutiny. Each angle of interpretation helps to explain a major feature of the multidimensional and fundamental changes that have occurred during the last 30 years of post-communist transformation. Armed with the theories of elites, the theories of schools, elite schools, and my conceptual framework of 4 angles of scrutiny, I developed typologies of elites and elite schools in Poland. These are what researchers call ideal typical categories, artificial constructs derived from observable complex reality. So, what are the characteristics of the ideal typical elite schools in Poland? Well, prestige is a matter of perspective and context. What has a value for one person may not hold the same value for another. As mentioned earlier, the existing literature on elite education points to a number of signifiers that contribute to schools' prestige and constitute eliteness. These include schools' excellent reputation and facilities, highest academic achievements, long history, impressive list of successful alumni, particularly number of Nobel Prize winners or heads of state, economic capital required to attend, stratification potential through pathways to prestigious universities, and consequently to positions of leadership and power nationally and/or globally. As I found out through my fieldwork, these factors weigh differently in Poland, as I discovered through a thorough examination of a wide range of data, both generated and collected. In my analysis of website, for example, I show how marketing materials appeal to targeted groups of clients. through discourses of values and beliefs, competitive advantage, superiority, and exclusion, contributing to the segmentation and differentiation of an emerging local marketplace of elite school options. The analysis of websites revealed that schools used ideologically diverse discourses to project their ethos and identities to construct elite status and to appeal to distinct groups of clients. Some private schools discourses position them as globalist and liberal. Other schools appeared more localist, conservative, and Christian. Some schools put most emphasis on participation in civil society and commitment to democratic principles, while others were most likely to display their results-based superiority. On the websites of what I call international schools, globalization and global connections feature most prominently. This is particularly noticeable when examining school logos and other elements of the home pages. I'll just show you some school logos because I can't show you everything, of course. So the world represented by an image of a sphere epitomizes the global scope. The mission statements emphasize raising and educating future global citizens. These schools attract those elites who are most affected by globalization. They either choose this kind of education for perceived competitive advantage or are forced to do so by their international occupational circumstances. Typical statements include phrases such as education that meets both local and international standards in an environment of openness, multiculturalism, and achievement. Or another statement, fostering the development of dynamic, considerate, and responsible world citizens, and so on and so forth. Such discourses indicate that these schools are excellent breeding grounds for developing students' portfolio of dispositions required for global mobility, global citizenship beyond the confines of nation states, and at transnational level. Students are groomed to become leaders and facilitators of global change, or at least to be able to engage in economically rewarding work at national and international levels. The International Baccalaureate Diploma program, widely offered by international schools, claims that it fosters international understanding and cooperation and produces more compassionate, socially responsible global citizens. Catholic schools' websites bring to the forefront narratives and discourses rooted in the Polish Christian history and tradition, and promote values and beliefs of Catholic Church. When I say Catholic schools, I mean private schools that were set up by organizations and foundations influenced by Catholic ideology, such as Family Covenant Association, Stowarzyszenie Przymierza Rodzin, or Schools of the Education and Family Support Association Sternik, Stowarzyszenie Sternik. It does not mean that they are owned or governed by Catholic Church. The links and images frequently advertise Christian holidays and relevant celebratory events. The workshops, lectures, guest speakers, and other events are conducted by or connected to organizations of religious nature or Catholic universities, such as Cardinal Stefan Wyszyński University in Warsaw or Catholic University in Lublin, and frequently show images of priests. On the webpage of School A, we read, school is not only about learning, it's also about traditions, customs, and the community. So here we see some Catholic school logos. Elite Catholic schools' websites embrace religious and Christian imaginaries and sometimes aristocratic-like splendor, reflected by schools' crests. The school's crest is a symbolic anchoring sign that often contains images such as a coat of arms to signify nobility, open books to signify scholarship, swords to signify strength, holy crosses to signify Christianity, and Latin mottos to signify tradition and cultural elitism. These images are strategically placed on the crest to signify and valorize the elite ethos of the school. Accordingly, the school crest is placed on the school homepage to mark the homepage as a location governed by the school's elite values. The prominent narratives on these websites represent the ethos of the institution. Common words used in these statements include God, religion, tradition, culture, Catholic, family, community life, patriot, cultural heritage. A message from Principal of School B, conspicuously displayed on the homepage, states, "In our school, we endeavor to instill in our students respect for other people. The boys are encouraged to be optimistic about the challenges of everyday life. Male teachers should be role models of a Christian gentleman and should help the boys to strive for improvement to better serve others. Young men need good role models. One of the goals of School B is to help parents raise their sons to become the sort of men that their daughters would like to marry." Such message is substantially different to a message on an elite international school, which states, "Academia High School has been connecting Poland with the best universities in the world for nearly 10 years. Very different focus. Social schools focus on democracy, human rights, human rights and civil liberties, which is skillfully represented by one school's logo, a symbolic tetrastyle in a circle that immediately brings to mind the ancient Greek agora. Ancient Greece is widely referred to as the cradle of Western civilization and the birthplace of democracy. The logo represents the school's connection to the European traditions and commitment to social justice and democratic values, and its focus on citizenship and civil society. These values go beyond local history and traditions and embrace the universal and European imaginaries. The school is a member of European School Network and has connections through Europe and Asia. References to democracy feature prominently on the school website. In fact, the school's government structure represents the mini democratic society with tripartite separation of power. The school argues that this is an exceptional element that distinguishes them from other high schools. Under About the School tab, we read, "School democracy is one of the foundations of our school. It is an exceptional element that distinguishes our school from other high schools because our students can participate in school management and influence it through various democratic institutions." The principle of social schools were often critical of the nationalistic positions of Catholic and even government schools. The principle of a social elite school fears that the passion for rituals, particularly celebrations of national heroic sacrifices, reinforces the Poland-centric ideology and nationalistic narratives that fuel the undesirable xenophobic and racist emotions in some sections of the community. She sees the celebrations of history and tradition in Polish schools as emotionally mobilizing students against the external and internal enemies, contributing to societal division. 'Tis. 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 ' The highest ranking selective government schools, particularly those with long history, also enjoy the reputation of true elite schools. Although they are free to attend, their prestige is unquestioned and comes from many aspects of their institutional identity. The websites proudly display pages of schools' history and history of their patrons, whose images frequently feature on school logo. The patrons of elite government schools are most frequently influential historical figures of kings, politicians, scientists, artists, or other significant national leaders. Displaying the symbols of history and tradition, these schools underscore their superiority against the other, less established new players on the market. Their long history is a marker of long established quality, reliability, and stability. Although the history and tradition have a strong presence on the selective government schools' websites, it is their academic success that dominate their discourses of superiority. Winning at Olympiads has become a dominant signifier of prestige of government elite schools. References to successes on subject competitions and Olympiads feature prominently on schools' websites, usually under the tab about the school's success. School E publishes multiple pages of its laureates. Such discourse is a homage to meritocracy, a proof that meritocratic system assures success and achievement for those who deserve it because of their personal qualities, their hard work, and commitment to study, regardless of their economic or social background. It is a powerful imaginary that disavows other aspects and conditions that facilitate academic success. Sociopolitical and sociocultural outlooks of elites reflect the sharp divisions between the globalists and localists, Euro enthusiasts and Eurosceptics, progressivists and conservatives, liberals and authoritarians, capitalists and socialists. However, the old bipolar divisions between left and right, liberals versus conservatives, or more recently, patriots and citizens, seem no longer sufficient to explain the complex tribalism of Polish elites. That's why my conceptual framework of 4 angles of scrutiny offers tools to explore and to capture the idiosyncrasies of post-communist elite tribes that might combine elements of traditionally conflicting ideologies. You know, it's you are familiar with how both sides in politics call themselves communists, for example. In summary, there are 4 major arguments in my study. The first argument is that social and political changes led to the emergence of new elites. The change of the political system created conditions where previously centrally imposed classlessness was challenged. I identified and theorized the key socio-historical forces in this transformation and demonstrated how they influenced the growing disparities in the economic, social, and political spheres. My second argument is that elites in Poland held different political and social outlooks. Disaggregating from the previous studies that portrayed elites as a fairly homogeneous group, unified by their economic and social hegemony, even if they were politically fragmented, I included other factors such as elite social and cultural proclivities. By scrutinizing the fragmentation of elites, I revealed important, although sometimes intangible, differences between them. My third main argument is that different elites sought different schools. The desire for differentiated education resulted in different types of elite schools. Elites with different values and interests established schools to promote their political, social, and cultural outlook. My fourth argument is that eliteness in post-communist Poland is becoming increasingly legitimized. In spite of the superficially anti-elitist rhetoric adopted by the current right-wing government, my analysis of findings confirms the process of legitimization of eliteness in the new social relations. My study's contributions to knowledge may also be summarized in 4 points. First point is that this study makes a contribution to sociology of elite education by expanding the geopolitical understandings of the ways that elite schools contribute to the creation and reproduction of privilege and power. My second contribution is the distinctive conceptual framework of 4 angles of scrutiny. This framework is transferable to other contexts where national, transnational, and global factors interact strongly. My third contribution is a new typology of Polish elites. Based on the elites' dominant political and social outlooks, I separated these groups into 4 ideal typical categories. Globalists, mainly connected with globalization and internationalization. Civil society builders, committed to building a civil democratic society and concerned about social justice and environmental issues. Guardians of tradition and religion, motivated to preserve sovereign Polish state and historic traditions and Catholicism. And finally, pragmatic professionals, committed to their careers or field of expertise. These categories may imbricate or blend together. However, my typology focuses on the elite's ideal typical profile. The fourth contribution to knowledge this thesis makes is a typology of Polish elite schools. And I already showed them to you, but I just repeat quickly. By comparing the similarity and differences of signifiers of eliteness in the Polish context to those described by studies in the West and Asia, I identified 4 ideal typical categories of elite schools. These categories directly correlate with the identified ideal typical categories of elites mentioned before. The identified school categories are as follows: international schools, focused on producing international citizens equipped with cosmopolitan skills and fluent in foreign languages, mainly English. Social schools focused on educating socially conscious citizens, socially and politically involved and committed to democracy. Catholic schools focused on educating Christian patriotic Poles committed to the preservation of national history and tradition, promoting Catholic values and the traditional heteronormative family. And finally, selective government schools focused on producing experts and professionals in various fields and promoting competition and meritocracy. Now, please remember that these are ideal typical categories. They are based on the strongest proclivities demonstrated by different groups. It doesn't mean that government schools can't be internationally oriented or that social schools do not embrace tradition. It means that these outlooks were of secondary importance. Some proclivities are stronger in some groups. For example, for globalists, the cosmopolitan skills and ability to function globally is paramount, while ideal typical guardians of tradition see this type of education as isolating children from their families and local communities. As one principal said to me, these children don't learn Polish history or literature. They are isolated from majority of their Polish peers, and they will not be able to fit in with their local communities. It also does not necessarily mean that civil society builders or pragmatic professionals cannot have international outlook or that they are not attached to history or religion. They can, of course, and they often are, that these are not as important as their main proclivities toward either engagement in civil society in social schools or a commitment to academic success and fostering of professional career in government schools. This leads me to my concluding statement. The new circumstances and changing socio-political landscapes invite further research about the rise of populism in Poland and the role of elite actors in this process. In spite of growing interest, populism is rarely analyzed from the perspective of elites. Mainly, elites have been analyzed from a populist perspective that presents them as somewhat unified, corrupt, and as exploiting the people. Only recently have comparative studies of populism acknowledged the fact that different populist critiques target different elite groups. I would be interested to explore further what persuasive strategies the diverse elites, including populist elites, both left and right wing, adopt in their critiques of each other, and how they construct themselves and their others through rhetoric and discourse. This involves the ways elites shape their own subjectivities, ego ideology, and the subjectivities of their others, alter ideology. It now appears that by positioning themselves as outside of the masses, including educationally, Poland's elites of various stripes now must carefully assess the ways they see and are seen by others. This requires continued research and possibly new angles of scrutiny. Thank you for listening. Your questions and comments are welcome.
Thank you so much, Gosia. If you could stop sharing the slides so we could see each other more closely. Thank you so much for your presentation. While you were talking, and I will open the floor for comments and questions in a moment, I feel like those different types of schools have always existed in Poland, but they were part of the government system. There were schools, with high academic achievements. Some schools were more international, maybe not that many, and not in with such a strong opportunity to collaborate international. But still, I think there were some variety there. And it's interesting to look back. For me, it's just a comment to see how it happened that in Poland, privatization of schooling and education just happened. And it's just seemingly, so it's just an observation, but maybe it will be part of the conversation today as well.
Yes, thank you.
So please feel free to comment or raise your hand or just speak up with any comments, questions.
I'm sure there are among the listeners. Oh,
I think Eva is happy to speak. Go ahead, Eva. If you can just unmute yourself.
Of course, I have to unmute myself. Gosia, it was an interesting presentation. Thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
It is a topic very close to my heart, not just as a parent of one child only, but my daughter went to a state primary school, and two elite secondary schools, and I taught for 25 years, nearly 30 years in elite private schools. At the same time, my heart is with the state education.